The psychology of people who feel lonely in a crowd. The loneliest people are not always the ones sitting alone. Sometimes they're the ones surrounded by voices, laughter, music, movement, and people who think they are perfectly fine. They may be at a dinner table, smiling at the right moments. They may be in a group chat, reacting with the right emojis. They may be at a party, standing close to everyone, but feeling far away from all of them. From the outside, it may look like they belong. But inside, something feels missing, because being around people is not the same as being connected to people. And for some people, loneliness does not come from the absence of others. It comes from the absence of being truly seen. They can sit in a crowded room and still feel invisible. Not because nobody is looking at them, but because nobody is really noticing what is happening inside them. Nobody notices the quiet tension behind their smile. Nobody notices how carefully they choose their words. Nobody notices how often they adjust themselves to fit the mood of the room. They may laugh when everyone laughs. They may answer when someone asks a question. They may seem calm, friendly, social, and easy to be around. But deep down, they're not fully there. A part of them is watching. A part of them is measuring. A part of them is wondering, can I really be myself here? And when the answer feels like no, loneliness begins. Because loneliness is not always about distance. Sometimes, loneliness is about emotional mismatch. It is being surrounded by people who know your face, but not your inner world. It is having conversations, but never feeling understood. It is hearing people talk, but not feeling like there is space for your truth. It is being physically included, but emotionally alone. Some people feel lonely in a crowd because they have learned how to perform connection better than they know how to receive it. They know how to be polite. They know how to make others comfortable. They know how to listen, smile, nod, respond, and keep the atmosphere light. But they do not know how to let themselves be fully known. Maybe because they tried before. Maybe they opened up once, and someone made them feel too sensitive. Maybe they shared something real, and the other person changed the subject. Maybe they showed sadness, and someone told them to be positive. Maybe they expressed a need, and someone made them feel like a burden. So they learned to bring only the acceptable parts of themselves into the room. The funny part, the calm part, the helpful part, the version that does not make things uncomfortable, the version that does not need too much, the version that can survive socially, even when it feels emotionally tired. And over time, this becomes a mask, not a fake personality, not a lie, but a protective layer, a way of staying safe, a way of being near people without risking rejection. Because sometimes being truly yourself around the wrong people can feel more dangerous than being alone. So they adapt. They read the room. They sense people's moods. They notice when someone is bored, annoyed, distracted, or uninterested. They change their tone. They soften their opinions. They hide their sadness. They hold back their excitement. They make themselves easier to digest. And by the end of the night, everyone may think they had a good time, but they go home exhausted. Not because they hate people, not because they are antisocial, not because they do not appreciate the invitation, but because they spent the whole time managing themselves. They were present, but not free. They were included, but not understood. They were surrounded, but not emotionally held. And that kind of loneliness can feel confusing, because it does not make sense at first. You ask yourself, why do I feel empty after being with people? Why do I feel more alone after socializing? Why do I want connection, but feel tired when I get it? And maybe you start blaming yourself. Maybe you think you are ungrateful, too complicated, too quiet, too sensitive, too difficult to connect with. But maybe the problem is not that you are too much. Maybe the problem is that you have spent too much time in places where only a small part of you is welcome. Because real connection does not ask you to disappear in order to belong. It does not require you to shrink your feelings. It does not require you to become easier, lighter, quieter, or less human. Real connection feels different. It does not always have to be loud. It does not always have to be exciting. It does not always have to look impressive from the outside. Sometimes, real connection is one person asking, "Are you really okay?" and waiting long enough for the honest answer. Sometimes it is someone noticing your silence without judging it. Sometimes it is sitting beside someone and feeling like you do not have to perform. Sometimes it is being able to say something messy, unfinished, or emotional and not feeling punished for it. That is what many lonely in a crowd people are actually craving. Not more attention, not more invitations, not more people, but more depth, more honesty, more emotional safety, more space to be real. Because you can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely if nobody meets you where you actually are. And you can be with one safe person and feel less alone than you do in a room full of familiar faces. This is why some people feel most lonely during social events. Because the contrast becomes painful. The noise around them reminds them of the silence inside them. The closeness around them reminds them of the distance they feel. The laughter around them reminds them of the parts of themselves they are hiding. It reminds them of what is missing. It reminds them that closeness can exist physically without existing emotionally. So they may leave social events feeling more tired than before. Not because they dislike people, but because they spent the whole time managing themselves, choosing the right words, hiding the wrong feelings, laughing when they wanted to be quiet, acting relaxed when they felt unseen, making sure nobody noticed the gap between who they were showing and who they really were. And when they finally get home, the mask comes off, the room becomes quiet, and suddenly, the loneliness that was hidden under noise becomes loud. They may wonder why they feel empty after being around people. They may blame themselves. They may think they are ungrateful, too complicated, too sensitive, or too difficult to connect with. But maybe the problem is not that they need too much. Maybe the problem is that they have spent too long accepting too little honesty, too little depth, too little emotional safety, too little space to be fully human. Because real connection is not just being near someone. It is feeling like your inner world has somewhere to land. It is feeling like you do not have to translate your pain into something acceptable. It is feeling like your silence, your sadness, your softness, and your strange little thoughts can exist without being corrected. And if you often feel lonely in a crowd, maybe it does not mean you're broken. Maybe it means your heart is asking for something more real than surface-level belonging. Maybe you're tired of being known only by your role. The funny one, the calm one, the strong one, the helpful one, the one who never makes things difficult. Maybe you're tired of being liked for the version of you that costs the most energy to maintain. And maybe your loneliness is not a sign that you should isolate forever. Maybe it is a sign that you are ready for relationships where you can finally exhale. Relationships where you do not have to audition for acceptance. Relationships where your honesty does not scare people away. Relationships where being quiet does not make you invisible. Relationships where you're not just invited, but understood. Because the goal is not to be surrounded by everyone. The goal is to be safe with someone. Even one honest connection can remind your nervous system that you do not have to disappear to belong. Even one person who sees you clearly can make a crowded world feel less empty. So if you feel lonely around people, do not shame yourself for needing something deeper. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for something real. And maybe that loneliness is not proof that you are impossible to connect with. Maybe it is proof that your heart still remembers what real connection is supposed to feel like.